Hi, I'm Art Kaplan. I'm at the Division of Medical Ethics at NYU's Grossman School of Medicine. For many, many, many years, longer than I care to remember, I have been involved with transplantation, transplant ethics, trying to think about how to persuade people to give their organs when they die, to make that more attractive to people. It's still something that many people don't do and are reluctant to do. And it leaves us with a shortage of organs. We simply do not have anything close to the number of kidneys, hearts, livers, lungs that we could transplant because people just don't agree to give them when they die. At the same time, the demand keeps going up for organs. We have a population that's older, and that leads to more organ failure. That leads to more demand. People need transplants because there's more diabetes. There are people with high blood pressure. There are people still smoking, drinking. Even as sad as it may sound, attempts at suicide drive up the transplant ranks because you can damage your liver if you binge drink or swallow a bottle of pills and you don't succeed. A lot of different variables at work about why demand is big and growing. Also, the competency of transplant teams in the US is growing. They can take on tougher cases and harder cases. So every day in the US, people will die because there aren't organs to give them. And every day in the US, there are going to be very tough decisions about who is going to get one of the scarce hearts or livers that is available to transplant. Now, the process of deciding who's going to get one of those organs is two steps. The first is whether the transplant center will take you in as a candidate for a transplant, whether it's NYU or Penn or Stanford or Nebraska, wherever it is, they have decisions to make in their transplant programs at these institutions about who needs a transplant and whether they think they have the skill, the ability to give them that transplant. If they take them in, then we have a national waiting list that distributes organs mainly according to blood type, tissue type, geography, need in terms of who might be sickest, and with some attention as well to who might benefit the most. So a delicate balance off the national list. But what I want to talk to you about now is the status of people who are trying to get in to a transplant center and what factors drive that decision. Well, obviously, you have to be an organ failure. And if you're so sick that they don't think you could survive the operation, you won't get on a transplant list. Access to good medical care, access to good primary care, people who have that are advantaged in our society over people who don't. To be blunt, the homeless are less likely to show up on anybody's transplant list than the wealthy. And that's just a reality of how medical care and healthcare are distributed in our society. But transplant centers pay attention to other things, lifestyle. They say, are you drinking? Are you smoking? Are you someone who is a high suicide risk? Are you in a situation where you're abusing drugs? And most recently, are you vaccinated? And this is a topic that really sets off argument and dispute vaccination status as a condition for admission to transplant centers. My own position is if vaccination before a transplant helps the transplant to work because it builds up immunity to infectious diseases, COVID, flu, measles, whatever we can vaccinate for, that might kill you post-transplant because you're immunosuppressed, then that is a reasonable thing to take into consideration in deciding who's coming in to get a transplant. And it is a reasonable thing to use to decide who has priority for a transplant. It's not punishing people who choose not to vaccinate any more than saying you can't smoke if you're going to get a heart transplant. It's a decision based on what's going to work, what increases the chance of a good outcome. If vaccination does that, then COVID vaccination status or any other vaccination status, including potentially shingles, the zoster vaccine, is relevant to take into account. Is it the only thing to take into account? Probably not. but is it something that transplant centers appropriately, ethically can weigh, knowing that there are many people who are vaccinated who are eligible for transplants? I'm going to say yes. If you do things that diminish the chance of success with a scarce life-saving resource like a heart or lung or liver, then I think the doctor's duty is to try and steward those organs to get the best results to save the most lives with the scarce supply. Vaccination bears on that, and as it does, it becomes morally relevant to who's going to get access to a transplant. So I know there are many who would say demanding vaccination is just an example of bullying people who don't want to do it. I would defer and say no. What vaccination status indicates is, one more fact, a lifestyle choice that bears on whether you're likely to survive or not if you do and are lucky enough to get a transplant. Overall, saving the most lives is what we want to happen with our scarce supply of organs, but even more overall, we want more people to donate organs so that these hard choices don't have to be quite as hard. Nonetheless, they are, and I think you have to take into account what's medically relevant. I'm Art Kaplan at the Division of Medical Ethics at the NYU Grossman School of Medicine. Thanks for watching.